Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Okay, you lot knew this was coming.
A deep drill into 50
Yeah.
Shades of Grey. We're diving into the part everyone kind of skimmed through while trying not to,
Blush on the bus.
Right.
And let's be real.
We're all adults here.
So we're going to call a spade, a cock,
Absolutely.
and a red room of pain.
Uh-huh.
Well, you get the picture.
Gotta keep it real.
What's interesting right off the bat is how E.L. James uses Anastasia's point of view to, draw us into this world.
Yeah.
We experience Christian Grey's intensity alongside her. His sharp gaze, the way he commands attention.
It's almost voyeuristic, wouldn't you say?
Totally. Like from that first meeting at Grey Enterprises Holdings.
The air practically crackles.
You've got Anastasia, this innocent English lit student, thrown into the lion's den with this
powerful, dominant CEO.
Oh, yeah.
It's the classic good girl meets kinky billionaire fantasy.
And let's be honest.
That's a huge part of the appeal.
Right. The power dynamic is so central to their relationship. We see Anastasia's awkwardness juxtaposed with Christian's absolute control.
And yet, there's this undeniable spark.
And James milks it for all it's worth.
Those stolen glances, the way he notices her biting her lip.
Oh, yeah.
It's all about building sexual tension from the get-go.
And let's be real, that inner monologue of Anastasia's.
It's basically what every woman wishes she could say out loud to.
Mr. Tall, dark, and filthy rich.
It's true. And the way their relationship progresses.
It's like something out of a romance novel on steroids.
Totally.
That whole hardware store encounter.
Who knew cable ties could be so damn suggestive?
And then, bam! He whisks her off to Seattle in his helicopter.
Talk about a whirlwind. It's clear Christian operates on a different level.
And James uses that to both entice and intimidate Anastasia.
He's offering her a taste of a life she's never known, luxurious, exciting.
And maybe a little bit terrifying.
Exactly. And then we get to the infamous playroom reveal.
Talk about a game changer.
Oh, here we go.
1 minute they're discussing books.
The next, Anastasia's staring at whips. Chains.
And enough leather to make a dominatrix blush.
Right. It's like Christian ripped off a mask and showed her his true self.
His deepest desire.
And Anastasia's reaction.
A mix of terror and, well, let's just say she's definitely intrigued.
It's that push and pull that, is he gonna fuck me or flog me?
Tension.
That keeps you glued to the page.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The playroom becomes this symbolic space.
Representing Christian's need for control, his desire to inflict pain.
And honestly, his yearning to dominate every aspect of Anastasia's existence.
But it's also a place of vulnerability for him, which is intriguing.
It's true. He's got all these rules, these limits.
Like no spanking, no anal. It's like he's trying to keep things controlled.
Almost clinical, even when they're getting down and dirty.
It's almost like he's trying to contain this part of himself.
This darkness that he associates with pleasure.
And that, I think, is what makes him so fascinating.
He's this paradox of dominance and vulnerability.
And you can't help but want to understand him better. And Anastasia, she's grappling with her own desires.
Her apprehension about this whole lifestyle.
She's drawn to his power, to his cock.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
But she's also scared shitless, and rightfully so.
It's that internal conflict that makes her relatable to so many readers.
She's not just some submissive pushover. She questions Christian.
Tries to set boundaries, even tries to walk away when things get too intense.
But he always pulls her back in, right?
Like a moth to a flame, or maybe a sub to a dom.
It's that whole bad boy appeal.
The allure of the forbidden.
He's everything she's not supposed to want.
Which, of course, makes him irresistible.
And you can't deny the chemistry between them.
Even with all the BDSM stuff, there are moments of genuine tenderness.
Like when he takes care of her after she drinks too much.
It's those little glimpses of humanity that make him more than just a caricature.
Of a dominant male.
Okay, before we get too deep into their messed up love story.
Let's talk about that elephant in the room.
Or should I say, the contract on the coffee table? Because things are about to get very, very interesting.
That contract is where the rubber meets the road.
Or maybe the whip meets the ass, so to speak.
Right.
It takes the relationship from those heated glances and stolen kisses.
And puts it all down in black and white. No pun intended.
It's like Christian's need for control just exploded onto those legal-sized pages.
Oh, spanking, you said.
But there it is, Clause 3, subsection B.
Punishment for a transgression will be administered at my discretion. This will usually take the form of spanking.
Is it hot? Is it messed up? I'm still trying to decide.
What's fascinating is how James frames it.
Christian tries to present it as a matter of safety.
Of consent, even, within their unconventional dynamic.
But you can't ignore the power imbalance.
It's his rules, his limits, his terms.
And Anastasia's basically signing away her right to say ouch.
And let's be real, she's totally into it, at least on some level.
That whole inner goddess thing.
It's like she's trying to justify this whole yes, daddy scenario to herself.
She's caught between her own desires, which, let's be honest, are pretty fucking intense.
And her apprehension about entering this world of dominance and submission.
The contract forces her to confront those desires.
To acknowledge that maybe she wants to be possessed, controlled.
At least by a guy like Christian Grey.
And who can blame her?
Mm-hmm.
He's rich, he's powerful.
He's hung like a horse. I mean, the dude's got fantasy written all over him.
Even if he does come in the sight of light bondage.
It's that push and pull.
That blend of fairy tale romance and taboo desires.
That made this book such a phenomenon.
James tapped into something that many women,
even if they wouldn't admit it publicly,
found incredibly alluring.
And let's not forget those sex scenes.
James doesn't hold back.
She gives you all the dirty details.
The hard cocks, the wet pussies, the spanked asses.
It's enough to make you need a cold shower.
The explicit language is definitely a big part of the appeal.
But it's also how she uses it to build tension.
Those stolen moments in the elevator, the way he touches her.
The anticipation of what's to come.
It's all expertly crafted to get the reader hot and bothered.
That elevator scene.
Just the image of him pinning her against the wall.
His hands on her tits, her ass grinding against his.
It's pure, unadulterated lust.
And it plays right into that power dynamic we were talking about.
Exactly. It's not just about the physical act of sex. It's about control.
About dominance, about surrendering to someone else's desires.
And that's incredibly erotic, even if it's a little bit messed up.
Oh, okay, but it's not all just fuck me harder, Mr. Grey, right?
There are moments where James gives us a glimpse of something deeper.
Like when Christian opens up about his past.
His messed up childhood with Mrs. Robinson. It humanizes him.
Shows that he's not just this emotionless dom.
Those glimpses into his vulnerability are so important.
They remind us that even someone as seemingly powerful and in control as Christian
has their own demons, their own insecurities.
And it makes you wonder, what happened to make him this way?
What kind of pain is he carrying that makes him need to control everything and everyone around him?
And let's be real, those moments of vulnerability make him even hotter.
It's like, oh, you're a tortured soul with a penchant for spanking. Tell me more.
There's definitely something alluring about the broken bird trope.
Especially when that bird is a billionaire with a six-pack.
Speaking of broken birds, let's talk about Anastasia.
She's not just some submissive doormat.
She pushes back against Christian, questions his motives.
Even tries to walk away from the whole thing. Several times, in fact.
She has this inner strength that I think is often overlooked.
Despite her obvious attraction to Christian and her willingness to explore this lifestyle.
She's not afraid to voice her own desires, to set boundaries.
Even if it means risking his anger or rejection.
Which, let's be honest, is pretty damn hot in its own right.
It's like, yeah, you could spank me, but don't think for a second that you own me.
It adds a layer of complexity to their dynamic.
It's not just one-sided. There's a push and pull, a negotiation happening.
And that's what makes their relationship, for all its problematic aspects.
It's so compelling to read about.
So we've got this twisted love story, a shit ton of kinky sex.
And enough emotional baggage to fill a jumbo jet.
But let's be real, what everyone wants to know is...
Does Anastasia end up submitting completely?
Does she let Christian tie her up, bend her over?
And have his wicked way with her?
Well, you'll have to keep reading to find out.
But what I can say is that James does a masterful job of keeping the reader on the hook.
Just when you think you know where the story is going.
She throws in a curveball, leaving you wanting more.
Okay, before we go any further...
Let's take a moment to appreciate the cultural impact of this book.
Because, let's be real.
50 Shades of Grey wasn't just a book. It was a phenomena.
You're right. It brought BDSM into the mainstream.
Sparked countless conversations about sexuality and consent.
And let's be honest, it probably sold a lot of sex toys too.
Oh, for sure. Suddenly, everyone was talking about red rooms and riding crops.
It was like the whole world discovered its inner dom and sub.
And while the book has definitely been criticized for its portrayal of BDSM,
and its potentially unhealthy power dynamics,
you can't deny its impact.
It opened a dialogue, challenged social norms.
And ultimately, it got people talking about sex in a way they hadn't before.
And let's not forget, it spawned a whole franchise.
Movies, sequels, fan fiction, Christian Grey and Anastasia Steele became household names.
It became this generation's guilty pleasure.
A shared secret among millions of readers.
And even if you want to hate on it,
you can't deny its cultural significance.
Okay, but let's get back to the good stuff.
The sex. Because things are about to get really interesting in the Red Room. All right, so we're back.
And primed to dive into the belly of the beast?
That infamous Red Room?
Oh, yeah.
You know those scenes had everyone dog-earing pages?
And needing a cold shower.
It's where Christian's control and Anastasia's burgeoning desires collide head-on.
James takes us on a wild ride through those red doors.
And it's both exhilarating and, if we're being
But a
honest,
bit unsettling.
no kidding, we're talking whips, chains, blindfolds.
Full shebang.
It's like 50 Shades went full on S&M.
And honestly, that's where a lot of the criticism comes in, right?
Absolutely. Critics argue that this is where the line between erotic fantasy,
And potentially problematic power dynamics gets blurry.
some readers see it as glorifying an abusive relationship,
While others argue it's just fantasy.
a way to explore those darker desires in a safe space,
Right.
a book, if you will,
No one's saying you should find your own Christian Grey.
and sign away your right to say no to a spanking.
Right.
It's about the escapism, the thrill of experiencing something taboo.
Vicariously, through Anastasia.
And let's not forget, Anastasia does negotiate.
She sets limits, even in the Red Room.
She's not just a passive participant in this.
She's curious, she's aroused,
And she's also scared, which makes her reaction all the more believable.
even amidst all the whips and chains.
Okay, but let's be real. The sex scenes in the Red Room.
They're next level hot.
Oh, yeah.
Jennings
Yeah.
goes all out with the descriptions.
The feel of his hand on her bare ass. The sting of the whip.
The way he makes her come with just a look, it's erotic.
It's intense, and it's probably illegal in some states.
Well, that's the power of her writing.
She uses language to evoke such visceral reactions in the reader.
You're right there with Anastasia, feeling the heat of his gaze.
The anticipation of his touch. Well, you get the picture.
And it's not just about the pain, right?
There's pleasure mixed in there,
Like
too.
a whole aftercare thing.
Christian tending to her wounds, holding her close.
Yeah.
It's like the tenderness after the storm.
And it adds another layer of complexity to the relationship.
Exactly. It reinforces that bond between them.
That sense of trust and intimacy that develops even amidst all the BDSM.
It shows that Christian isn't just some sadist getting off on inflicting pain.
He genuinely cares for Anastasia, even if his methods are a little unconventional.
And let's not forget, this is just the beginning of their journey.
Part 1 sets the stage for what's to come.
The deepening of their connection, the exploration of their desires.
And the inevitable clashes that arise when you mix a control freak billionaire.
With a vanilla girl who's just starting to discover her inner goddess.
It's a recipe for both ecstasy and disaster.
And that's what keeps readers coming back for more.
We're left wondering, can their love survive this?
Can Anastasia handle Christian's need for control?
Or will it ultimately drive them apart?
So there you have it, a deep drill into the phenomenon that is 50 Shades of Grey.
We've explored the power dynamics, the kinky sex,
And the surprisingly complex emotional undercurrent.
that made this book such a cultural sensation.
Whether you loved it, hated it, or just couldn't put it down.
There's no denying its impact on how we talk about sex, desire,
And the boundaries we're willing to push in the name of love.
or at least a really good spanking.
Until next time.
Keep it kinky, and remember, consent is always key.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.